welcome to the Nature Garden Podcast with me, Carl Stiansen, and the weekending show team from Lionheart Radio. It's a chance to take a wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees, and an opportunity to hear stories from the past and present. In this episode, Autumn Fruitfulness with Tom Pattinson, strawberry and raspberry stock taking, and it's jam time. We're out and about with Steve Lowe, who's on the trail of native Northumbrian crayfish. The fantastic flashes of riverside royalty Tom Cadwallader is in the company this week of kingfishers. Plus some top tips for the garden from Tom P. All coming up on the Nature Garden Podcast. Tom Pattinson's stock taking down among the strawberries and the raspberry canes, and the jam pan is calling.
Hello, it's autumn again, and I have fruit growing on my mind. And I can't get out of my mind that poem that we all probably learned as children. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruits the vines that round the thatch eaves run. John Keats, lovely, isn't it? Well, I don't have vines running round the thatch eaves, but I do have them in the unheated greenhouse. We have Madeleine Angevin, a so-called white grape, and Black Hamburg, which is reddish-purple fruits. They're both self-fertile, and they're worth their weight in gold because they give us such a crop year on year without too much trouble. At the moment, we still have bunches of Madeleine Angevin, the white one, dangling and very sweet indeed. We started to harvest them near the end of August. They're still going strong. And the Black Hamburg just started up end of September, going into this month, October, and they'll last for another month anyway. What we have to do to preserve them is to keep plenty of air going through the greenhouse, to keep a flow of air to stop the moulds and mildews forming on those plants, and keep watering down to a minimum. The leaves will start falling shortly, but those bunches will remain. They're beautiful, really worth the space they take up. But that's just part of the fruit story in this garden of ours. We start off in the summer with the strawberries. I have 3 or 4 varieties. 2 of the top ones for me are El Santa, which has been around about 30 years. In the early 90s it was introduced. It's so popular throughout the country. El Santa. And Hapil, which is another medium-sized to decent-sized red fruits, of course, and lovely taste. There's a slightly smaller one called Sweetheart. We have that as well. And then a big fruit on Sweet Colossus. Just bought it about 3 years ago. And you know, every year these strawberries will send out a long stem, shoot along the surface of the soil, and then on the end of it terminates with a mini plant, and it roots itself. Some people pin them into pots to root them, but I just let them root themselves, and I'm harvesting those at the moment, potting them up, and they'll keep me going next year and a few years' time. They'll be useful for about 3 or 4 years. After 4 years, I get rid of the older row of strawberries because by that time they're losing their vigour, there's not as much fruit, and they're more susceptible to pests and diseases. So keep young stock going and you'll never be short of strawberries. Can't put them in the freezer, they don't last long for us in the freezer, but we can turn them into delicious jam, and that's what my wife Judy does. So we're starting to eat the jam already, which was made in July-August period. The other soft fruit I grow, which is ripe shortly after the strawberries, is the raspberry. We grow a variety in July, August ripening called Glen Ample, and another one called Octavia, which takes us into the beginning of autumn. Really, there's some beautiful large fruits on another variety we have called Tulameen. That's Tulameen. Tulameen. Large fruits, beautiful stuff. And then autumn, we're picking at the moment, believe it or not, even though it's been raining and cooler days, we're picking from the autumn fruiting type. Joan J, that's Joan J, with huge fruits on it, and all gold. And that looks so brilliant when you're putting something together with the raspberries on, and you've got the red ones, the ripe ones, and the golden ones. Really pleasing to the eye as well as to the taste. Thornless brambles, we've got Loch Ness, which is a fair-sized one. No thorns on the stems, thank goodness, cultivated bramble or blackberry. And another one which I'm going to introduce called Black Butte, or Butte. It's black, B-U-T-T-E. I call it Black Butte, but it's the biggest one I've ever seen, and we're going to introduce that this autumn. There are gooseberries, red currants, white currants, black currants. They're all in the freezer at the moment. And that's the way to keep them fresh and see you through winter. Long live the fruit in this garden.
It's the great bird changeover time here in Northumberland, and Tom Cadwallander from the British Trust for Ornithology has been for a canny wander along his home patch on the River Aln estuary, where he got a rather lovely surprise. Over to you, Tom.
September and October can be absolutely fascinating months from an ornithological point of view. We're seeing really quite a period of change where we're having the summer visitors are leaving, they're heading south on migration. Winter visitors are arriving from the north, and it's just a great change going on, and passage birds are moving through as well. And just a great month to be out, and you just never know what's going to happen. And one of the big deals that I do almost every day, I walk out onto my local patch, which you may have heard me talk about this in the past, and that's the Aln estuary. And I just love going out onto the estuary. I walk from home, it's a big loop round, and I'm seeing all this different stuff going on there. And one of the beautiful things about having a local patch, and you do it regularly, is that you can see change. And you notice all the little differences, and it's really good fun from that point of view. But the other day I was out walking down to Alnmouth, and I was on the Duchess Bridge. There's a footbridge runs on the upriver side of the road bridge, and I often stop there to look at the muddy bits. Low tide is really good, or the rising tide is even better. But I look at the muddy bits and I see wading birds in there, and I see species like greenshank and little egret redshanks, and there's been quite a lot of black-tailed godwits this last couple of months. But then I heard this noise, this zit noise. That's probably not a very good impersonation, but it's as good as I can do. And it was a kingfisher. And kingfishers, you don't expect to see them so close to the sea. But why? And I see them every year at this time, it happens. But yes, it still catches me. Even though I've been kind of bird watching in this area for 30 plus years, it still catches me. The blue flash of the kingfisher. And they're not particularly big birds. They're only about sort of 5-6 inches big. And if you see the blue flash, the wings are kind of dark blue, and there's this streak down the back, and it's and down on the tail, and it's pale blue. And sometimes this blue, depending on the light, can change from azure to cobalt, and it's fabulous. But if it changes, if it turns round, you'll see it's got a lovely sort of orange belly to it. Now what happens is these kingfishers are coming down river. They've bred in the sort of quieter stretches of the river, and this particular case is the River Aln, but it happens on every river. And the nest in banks, they'll dig metre-long tunnel to raise their chicks. And the chicks are kind of reared at the end of it on a bed of fish bones, because these kingfisher that we have here, the Alcedo atitis, is particularly associated with fish, and that's all they will have. So yes, the whole tunnel, the whole nest site is full of fish bones, and it's quite sort of smelly as well. But anyway, they'll nest upriver, and after they've raised their young, they will come downriver during the autumn. So yes, that's why we're seeing them on the Alnestuary. And indeed, as the autumn progresses and gets to winter, it becomes colder and more difficult for these birds to fish. We can actually see kingfishers on rock pools. So when you're wandering out during the winter time, just keep an eye out for this little blue bird sitting sort of tucked away, quite motionless. And it's amazing. For such a brightly coloured bird, how can you miss them? But you can miss them because, they'll sit motionless. And if they have their back to you, it can be quite dark. And I've been fooled on a regular basis by the odd bit of blue plastic litter that's been stuck in a tree. And you think, oh, yeah, I've got a kingfisher here. You're quite excited, But then you put your binoculars up and you think, God, I've been caught again. It's another plastic bottle. But actually, sometimes they are sitting there. And they'll sit there so still. It's just amazing. But you've got to check them out. And if they've got their belly to you, it'll be this orange underpart. Oh, and it really stands out. And the light catches it. It looks fabulous. But you've got to keep your eye open because they do sit motionless. And on the other day, I see the odd ones on a regular basis. But the other day, I actually saw 3 together, well, almost together. One was on the east side of the river on its favourite perch, on its big tangle of roots, and it's sitting there motionless, just as the ebbing tide and there's little pools are created where fish will get trapped and they will be able to catch them. And also they will sit on the other side of the river, 2 were together, and there's a lot of interaction with them. We can tell the males from the females because the females have got this little, the bills generally are dark, but the females have got this little orange patch at the base of the bill. Whereas the males, it's all dark, the whole lot, right to the face. And it's easy enough to tell them if you get a decent view. But they'll sit there and they'll just sort of be cool, quite cool and so forth. But they're absolutely beautiful. And as light catches them, they will change colour. It's great. To think that we have such an exotic-looking bird in our kind of doorsteps, it's incredible, really. But the kingfisher that we have is known as the common kingfisher, and it's found throughout Britain, throughout Europe, North Africa, into Asia, right into East Asia, and as far almost as Australia. People have said to me, oh, I do like the British kingfisher. And actually, there's no such thing as a British kingfisher when you're comparing it to other species of kingfisher around the globe, because there are quite a lot of kingfishers around the globe. But we tend to think of this one that we have is kind of ours, but actually we share it with quite a large area of the planet, in fact. But they are quite special, I think, and you get a little thrill, a real thrill when you see them. It's brilliant. It's kind of one of those big deals and totally unexpected. And when I saw 3 the other day, I had a real spring in my step. It's another confirmation of kind of getting out on your local patch and getting out and seeing what's about and just keeping your eyes open, because a kingfisher day is a good day. 3 kingfisher day is a brilliant day. So there you are, folks. Keep an eye out. You never know whilst you might see a kingfisher next. Cheers then.
Tom Pattinson's enjoying the autumnal sunshine and checking out the fruits of his labours, and apples, plums, pears, well, they're all beckoning in the garden.
Continuing with fruits, we have a few tree fruits or top fruits in the garden. Victoria plum, conference pear, and a few apples, of course. So the Victoria plum, it flowers But February or March, sometimes there's a bit of frost around, or there's a strong wind around, and the pollinating insects are grounded, unfortunately, can't take to the air, and it relies upon them. But nevertheless, it always gives us quite a few plums. It's been in there, I have to say, for about 3 decades now, and it was grafted onto the pixie rootstock, which is worthwhile because in that time it's gone about 3 meters tall. That's in the region of 10 feet tall, and that's not too bad. It's easy to pick the fruits once they're ripe, of course. It's very reliable, and I'm not pruning it all at the moment. If it needs pruning, you have to watch out for silver leaf disease. Do not prune it in the winter because even the smallest open wounds, it can get in through there. The best time to prune it really is in the spring, and that's when, or late spring, that's when you've seen the little plums have formed already, and it's not good to be pruning them away. But from the end of May onwards, when the frost threat has gone in this area, then we can prune it May, June into July, that sort of period. So leave your Victoria plum, if it needs pruning, until that period. Those flowers in February, March, they're just beautiful. And of course the plums, they're just superb. And they freeze. We put them into packs because there's such a big crop, being bowls and bowls of them, and give some away. But they go into the freezer and we use them later in the year. And very useful. The conference pear is self-fertile as well. At this time of year, we're into October now, there are pears on the tree, but they're not ripe. They're hard, really hard. And it's no good leaving them out there. So what I do is I bring them into the house, put them in a drawer in one of the rooms, but you have to inspect them every other day because you can smell them when they're ripe, and they're ripening in there. Don't leave them too long without inspecting them. But they're quite tasty, conference pear, self-fertile. And then we come to the apples. I just love apples. I love growing apples. And we grow some dessert and some culinary or cooking apples as well, of course. The first one ready for us is Discovery, the beautiful red apple. It's ripened by the end of August and very tasty straight from the tree. But the problem with the early desserts is they don't keep for a long time in store during winter. And we have to eat that within a couple of months of picking them. Otherwise, it's a beautiful apple. It's self-fertile, of course, or they go off, they go over the top. Following that is James Grieve. The Scottish Discovery apple from many years ago. It's a beauty. Early before it's ripened, and it can be used as a cooker, culinary apple, but dessert, it's so tasty. And it's into September when it's ripened, and we've just been picking them this week, storing some of these early apples, and James Grieve will store for a while with us, but by Christmas time it's going over senescence, and it'll not keep far beyond that. So we enjoy it while it's there before Christmas. Then there's the Egremont Russet. Now, we're not picking that yet. It's October. It'll be the end of this month by the time we start picking it. And that lasts a bit longer, that beautiful nutty Egremont Russet taste, beautiful. And the one that we see most in the shops around here is Braeburn. Huge fruits, good dessert apple, but they're really hard at the moment, and it's going to be end of October into November before we pick them. We watch the blackbirds, and if the blackbirds start eating them, that's a sign it's time to pick them. Culinary type, cookers, we have Grenadier. It's ripe now. It won't last a long time in ripeness. It goes over quickly. Lord Derby, another cooker we have, it's ready for picking now, but it'll not last much beyond Christmas in store. Then there's Bramley Seedling. Found or discovered, launched in 1813, and still the most popular cooking culinary apple in this country. And the one that sport from that Bramley seedling came 100 years later, 1913. It's called Crimson Bramley, crimson coloured. It's a beautiful apple to look at, and it stays a long time in store as well. But I'd say my choice, top of the dessert apples, is James Grieve, most beautiful taste, and of course I have to go for the Bramley seedling for the one that is most reliable and lasts longest in store.
Crayfish are one of our harder to spot species, but the native county variety is sadly under threat, and Steve Lowe from the Northumbrian Rivers Trust is a man on a mission in the waters of the River Line.
Ah, it's lovely today. One of my favourite haunts on the River Line in Northumberland, and the reason I'm here today is because it's the last day that we can legally put out artificial refuge traps to look for crayfish, whether they be native or non-native. Now I'm on the River Line, and sadly last year we found non-native crayfish in the upper reaches of the river, but this year so far, and this trap that's just come, has got nothing in it, which is brilliant. So I've just taken 4 traps out, and well, as I say, they're refuge, because they're not technically traps because things can get in and out of them. And all I've pulled out so far has been a nice little brown trout, which is canny, but nothing to worry about in terms of crayfish. Of course, the fact that you've got nothing in your traps doesn't mean to say they're not here, but so far so good. We've not picked up any on this stretch at all in the last few months. One of the reasons why we're doing this, obviously, is because we've got the native crayfish in Northumberland, and the signal crayfish is an invasive species which causes, or potentially causes, problems, where in that it carries a plague with it. And that plague, if it gets into the local population of white-clawed crayfish, would be lethal to them. And if we can keep them out, then we will. So one of the things that we've been doing with the Rivers Trust this year, sorry, I'm just having a bit plodge, is to actually, we've actually been rescuing crayfish from a site where there was some works going on in the river. And we've created what are called ark sites. So if you think back to Noah and the ark, that's what these are. So we've created sites where we've, over the last few years, we've actually looked to check that there is no non-natives, that the conditions are suitable for it, for natives, that is. The water chemistry is good. And we've now actually moved about 700 into 4 new locations in Northumbrian, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, unfortunately, when I stopped, the reason I was plodging is because I've just found another invasive species actually in the line, which is Canadian pondweed, which probably comes up from someone's goldfish bowl or something like that. Now, there's not a big stand of it here, but it is quite invasive, so we'll have to keep an eye on that, which is unfortunate. And the river's actually really low, though we've had lots of rain the last couple of days, but the river is really low. So presumably it's still making its way downstream. And as such, the river's quite still. And I can see the bottom quite clearly. Lots of pebbles, bits of gravel, a bit of emergent vegetation. Lots of leaves, they're coming off quite early, aren't they? The sycamores in particular. Some lovely alders here, by the way, which are fruiting at the minute, which is brilliant. And then there's lots and lots of duckweed on the top of the water, which shows us that it's not moving very fast, because that would otherwise have disappeared by now. But no, a good day, a successful day so far, and we'll carry on and see what else we can find. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh no, that's okay. I thought that was another thing, but no. Right, heading back. One thing I'm just going to point out, that when I get back, everything I'm wearing will be disinfected, and I won't be wearing it again for a number of weeks. Now that's called biosecurity, because if there is, we know there's crayfish further up, if they are in any stretches like this, and I then go as I'm going to work on the River Wansbeck tomorrow, then I'll be carrying the spores from this plague with us. So I've got to thoroughly disinfect myself, which is something that we've been asking anyone who uses rivers to do once they come into contact with water where there could be signal crayfish. And that includes, things like landowners, vehicles going through the river, and also anglers. Anglers are really good at it, and we should all be good at it because we all know about COVID and biosecurity, so this is no different really. Now I'm just heading up to where the old mill used to be here, and so if I'm out of breath, that's because I'm an old man walking uphill. But I'm going to come up here is because you can tell it's otters near the geese. Now I hope that you'll be able to pick them up here. So anyway, well, it hasn't taken as long, but a good little job that, I think. And let's keep our fingers crossed for these white-clawed crayfish, because the population we have on the Wansbeck is quite vulnerable, and it's probably the best crayfish river in the country.
And to the sound of War Blackbird, here's Tom with some things to be getting on with in the garden.
Well, it's jobs for the week time. And although we have some potatoes stored in the garage where it's cool and dark, I still like to have some freshly grown new potatoes for Christmas. And bearing in mind that their growth period from planting, if they've got little shoots on, chitted, from planting to harvesting, can be around something like 9, 10, 11 weeks, then there's just time to get yours in now. All I do is I go for Charlotte, which is a beautiful waxy potato, lovely taste it has as well. I have just put them into pots, large pots in the greenhouse, half filled the pot, push Charlotte just down below the surface of the compost in the pot, and just put a little bit of compost over the top of it. As it starts to shoot in that compost, by the way, it is in the unheated greenhouse because it's reasonable temperature in there at the moment. When it rises up, the shoots merge above the compost. I put more compost on until everything's filled up just about to the brim of that large pot. And then the shoots grow, carry on until the time that a bit of frost touches the greenhouse. And then I have to watch them, give them a little bit of protection, drape some fleece over them, and that keeps them going. They don't need masses of heat. And if they can get 6 to 8 weeks of growth on, I'm fairly happy with that. And beyond that, about 10 weeks, they start to die off, the haulms, the shores. That doesn't matter. Just chop them off. They've done all the ground that they'll do for potatoes underneath. And then there's the great surprise when you tip the pot up at Christmas time and think, wow, just ready for cooking. I also sow lettuce, salad bowl in little drills in the greenhouse border, and oddly enough it's tough. There's enough heat in there at the moment for germination, and once that's there they acclimatise themselves to the cooler condition. And this is a leaf lettuce, and we cut and come again throughout winter, and if it gets too bad, drape that fleece over it for a few nights when there's frost. I'm checking the vegetables which are outside for winter use, the sprouts, the Brussels sprouts that is. I'm growing the one that's called Churchill, I guess who that's named after, and that one is quite tall and has some large button sprouts on it now already, and of course the cabbage white butterfly threat has gone as autumn's kicked in, so taking the nets off them and they're growing freely. But beware those autumn gales, they might need a cane in to give them support. It's worth doing that rather than after the horse has bolted shutting the door to the stable. That's been done. The leeks are fine, they stand alone, they're by themselves. We just pick them off as we require them. And other brassicas, cabbages, etc., they're doing fine also at the moment. So they're freshly picked from the garden as opposed to raiding anything that's stored like potatoes in the garage. I'm doing a little bit of pruning at the moment as well. The lavender cutting off all the stems, faded stems of lavender. They've attracted bees throughout the summer, and just recently that there's not a bit of colour on them, the flowers that is. So I'm cutting those stems off and just go a little bit into the green or the grey, more like grey wood, and a little bit into that, but not into the old wood. Otherwise you may kill the lavender off. And then I'm looking at the hydrangea. The blooms are just about finished on the hydrangea, but I never cut those faded blooms or the dead flower heads off, because some people do that to put spray on them, silver or golden spray, and use them in decorations over Christmas. But not I, because you'd be surprised the amount of protection they give to the embryo flower buds for next year, just a little bit lower on the stem. So I'll leave those hydrangea blooms off until the springtime. Time to start planting shortly outside. Shrubs, herbaceous plants, herbaceous perennials, fruits. Either get them ordered or get along to the garden centre and ice them up. Nature's planting time comes in October and November, so it's a chance to start thinking about that. We're also thinking about trimming the hedges for the last time. If we trim them now, it smartens them up for Christmas. The privet, the beech, the hawthorn, which surround our garden. And the next time we'll be able to cut them is really well into June, when the nesting birds have finished nesting. And they went into June with their second or third brood of fledglings this year. So now's the time to trim the hedges, because a long time until the hours are cut again. I'm composting as many garden weeds, not flowering weeds, but garden waste in terms of greens and browns. Not waste any of that. Gosh, it's busy at the moment. Whatever you're doing in your garden, enjoy it.
You've been listening to gardener Tom Pattinson, birder Tom Cadwallander from the British Trust for Ornithology, and Steve Lowe from the Northumbrian Rivers Trust. I'm Carl Stiansen, and don't forget you can listen back to all the previous reports we've done on the Nature Garden podcast. That's the Nature Garden podcast. Enjoy your gardening and time outdoors with nature. Bye for now.